The comma is the most frequently used punctuation mark with many rules governing its use. The purpose of the comma is to tell the reader to pause briefly in the reading of a sentence. Please watch to the end of this video as some of these rules may surprise you. Hello, I'm Paula. Welcome to my channel where I bring you insightful English grammar lessons to improve your knowledge of English. But before I go any further, please ensure that you subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of my lessons. Rule number 1. Use a comma to separate words, phrases, or clauses listed in a series. For example, sugar, butter, milk, and eggs are required to make a cake. These are items or words listed in a series. Here's another example. The objective of this lesson is for you to write, to speak, and to think clearly. These are phrases listed in a series. And our next example, to start the engine, push the starter button, put the lever in drive mode, and gently press the gas pedal. These are clauses being separated by a comma. Note number 1. Notice that the comma has been placed before the conjunction that precedes the last item in the series. Sugar, butter, milk, and eggs. The comma is placed before the conjunction and, which joins the last item in the series. The objective of this lesson is for you to write, to speak, and to think clearly. The comma is placed before the conjunction and, which joins the last phrase in the series. And in our last example, to start the engine, push the start button, put the lever in drive mode, and gently press the gas pedal. The comma is placed before the conjunction and, which joins the last clause in the series. Note number 2. Sometimes you may find it difficult to decide whether a comma should be placed after the last item in a series. Do not place a comma after the last item in a series if the last item can stand on its own to form a complete sentence without the other items in the series. Let me explain using an example. In this sentence, sugar, butter, milk, and eggs are required to make a cake. Should a comma be placed after eggs? Well, to solve this problem, test the last item in the series as though it were alone in the series and not part of the series. And if it forms a complete sentence, then no comma is required. Eggs is the last item in the series, so to test, we ignore the other items in the series and say, eggs are required to make a cake. This is a complete sentence. Therefore, a comma should not be placed after the last item in the series, which is eggs. Here is another example. Our school is located in a small, underpopulated rural town. Should a comma be placed after rural? Let's do the test. Our school is located in a rural town. That is a complete sentence, so no comma is required after rural. Note number 3. If the series is followed by a complete sentence, a comma should be placed after the last word in the series. Sugar, butter, milk, and eggs, these are required to make a cake. The last word in the series is eggs. Following eggs, we have a complete sentence. These are required to make a cake. Therefore, we add a comma after eggs. Note number 4. If the series ends with the abbreviation etc., which is the abbreviated form of the word etc., which means and others, a comma should be placed before the etc. and after the period unless it ends the sentence. For example, sugar, butter, milk, eggs, etc. are required to make a cake. A comma is placed after eggs and after the abbreviation etc. In our second example, etc. comes at the end of the sentence. Therefore, no comma is required. The requirements to make a cake are sugar, butter, milk, eggs, etc. However, please note that even though our second example is correct, it is preferable that you do not end your sentence with etc. It's better to write that sentence like this. The requirements to make a cake are sugar, butter, milk, eggs, and other ingredients. Rule number 2. Use a comma to separate two complete thoughts or independent clauses that are connected by a coordinate conjunction in a compound sentence. The coordinate conjunctions are and, but, or, nor, for, so, and yet. I do have a lesson on coordinate conjunctions. I will pin that video in the descriptions of this video. So continuing with rule number 2, let's look at some examples. The victim was not prepared to press charges now, nor will he be prepared for a few weeks. The victim was not prepared to press charges now is one independent clause. Will he be prepared for a few weeks is another independent clause. They are both joined by the conjunction nor, so a comma is placed before the conjunction. Another example is, our vacation is already planned, but we may have to make some changes. Our vacation is already planned is an independent clause, and we may have to make some changes is another independent clause. They are joined by the conjunction but, so we place a comma in front of but. Please note that the comma is placed before the conjunction, not after the conjunction. Note number 1. If the sentence is short and the two independent clauses are connected by the conjunction and or, we do not need a comma if the sentence is clearly understood. For example, your package arrived and we dispatched it promptly. Your package arrived is one independent clause, and we dispatched it promptly is another independent clause. They are joined by the conjunction and. However, since this is a short sentence, we do not need to add a comma before the conjunction and. Another example is, settle the invoice or send back the goods. No comma is required before the conjunction or. Note number 2. If the two independent clauses are connected by the conjunctions but or yet, a comma must be placed before the conjunction, no matter how short the independent clauses are. For example, we are ready to start the meeting, but it won't be long. This is a short sentence, but a comma is always placed before the conjunction but. Here's another example. They were not expected, yet they came. A comma is always placed before the conjunction yet. Rule number 3. Use a comma to separate the dependent clause and the independent clause in a complex sentence when the dependent clause precedes the independent clause. The natural sequence in a complex sentence is for the independent clause to precede the dependent clause. For example, John's friends rushed to congratulate him as soon as they heard the news of his promotion. John's friends rushed to congratulate him is the independent clause, and it precedes the dependent clause as soon as they heard the news of his promotion. Frequently, however, the sentence may be inverted and the dependent clause is placed at the beginning of the sentence to give greater emphasis. So let's switch around this sentence and place the dependent clause at the beginning for greater emphasis. As soon as they heard the news of his promotion, John's friends rushed to congratulate him. We place the comma at the end of the dependent clause. Here is another example. We cannot accept the offer even though you agreed to the terms and conditions. We invert this sentence and place the dependent clause even though you agreed to the terms and conditions at the beginning of the sentence, followed by the independent clause, we cannot accept the offer. Now our sentence reads, even though you agreed to the terms and conditions, we cannot accept the offer. The comma is placed at the end of the dependent clause. Rule number 4. Use a comma to set off expressions that, if omitted, would not destroy the sentence nor change its meaning. And we have 3 minor rules under this one. Number 1. To set off the name of a person directly addressed, no matter where it appears in the sentence. Number 2. To directly address someone with a term other than his or her name. And number 3. To set off an expression that explains a preceding word. Let's look at rule number 4.1. To set off the name of a person directly addressed, no matter where it appears in the sentence. For example, Mr. Brown, we trust you will cooperate willingly. A comma is used to set off the name of a person directly addressed. That is Mr. Brown. If we omit Mr. Brown, we would still have a complete sentence. We trust you will cooperate willingly. Therefore, we set off Mr. Brown with a comma. Please note that the name of the person addressed is set off with commas, no matter where it appears in the sentence. For example, Mr. Brown, comma, we trust you will cooperate willingly. We trust, comma, Mr. Brown, comma, that you will cooperate willingly. We trust that you, comma, Mr. Brown, comma, will cooperate willingly. We trust that you will cooperate willingly, comma, Mr. Brown. So you see, it doesn't matter where in the sentence Mr. Brown occurs, the name is set off by commas. Rule number 4.2. To directly address someone with a term other than his or her name. For example, you, comma, my brother, comma, are in for a big surprise. The term my brother is treated the same as if we had used someone's direct name. You, Mr. Brown, are in for a big surprise. Here's another example. Let me tell you, fellow directors, what this meeting is about. Fellow directors is set off in commas. We are directly addressing persons with a term other than their names. In both cases, we could have omitted my brother and fellow directors and have complete sentences. You are in for a big surprise, and let me tell you what this meeting is about. Rule number 4.3. To set off an expression that explains a preceding word. For example, Mr. Jones, comma, President of the Teachers Association, comma, will be at the meeting. President of the Teachers Association merely explains who Mr. Jones is. We could omit it and still would have a full sentence with the meaning unchanged. Mr. Jones will be at the meeting. Here's another example. The school principal, comma, having been away for several months, comma, is finally back at school. We could omit having been away for several months and still have a complete sentence with the meaning unchanged. The school principal is finally back at school. So the expression having been away for several months is set off by commas. Rule number 5. Use a comma to set off a short, direct quotation from the rest of the sentence. For example, Tom said, "I will not attend the meeting tomorrow." A comma is used before the direct quotation, "I will not attend the meeting tomorrow." Note, however, when the quotation is not direct and not in quotation marks, no comma is needed. For example, he said he will not attend the meeting tomorrow. There's no direct quotation. Note number 2 for rule number 5. When the quotation is not a complete thought in itself, but is built into the structure of the sentence, we omit the comma, even though quotation marks are used. For example, he said he was extremely busy and could not attend the meeting. Extremely busy is a quotation, but it is not a complete thought in itself, and it is built into the structure of the sentence, so no comma is required. Rule number 6. Use a comma following a transitional expression in a sentence if it interrupts the natural flow by forcing you to pause. Examples of transitional words and phrases are accordingly, notwithstanding, hence, consequently, as you know, in other words, in fact, for example, and however. So an example for rule number 6 is, Tom's homework is not completed. In fact, he did not answer a number of the questions. We place a comma after the transitional phrase, in fact. It requires us to make a pause in the sentence. Here's another example. Food prices have been increasing everywhere. However, some regions are less impacted than others. A comma is placed after the transitional word, however. Please note that not in all cases do we set off transitional words or phrases with a comma. When such an expression is used in a sentence in a manner that does not interrupt the natural flow of the sentence, no comma is required. For example, we therefore feel that you should proceed with caution. The natural flow of this sentence is not interrupted. No pause is necessary. However, we would need to offset it with commas if the sentence was written in this format. We feel, therefore, that you should proceed with caution. The natural flow is interrupted. A comma is placed before and after the transitional word, therefore. Rule number 7. Use a comma before and after abbreviations such as JR for junior and SR for senior, which follow a personal name, and INC for incorporated and LTD for limited, which follow a company's name. if they are not at the end of a sentence. For example, William George Smith Jr. is our newly elected chairman. A comma is placed at the end of the name preceding the abbreviation, and one is placed at the end of the abbreviation. Another example is the Baker Shop Inc. just released its latest breakfast pastry. A comma is placed after the name of the company preceding the abbreviation INC and one after. Okay, let's review some common errors made using the comma. Number 1. Do not separate a subject from its verb by a comma if the verb comes immediately after the subject. For example, a reliable, efficient worker, should be cherished. That is incorrect. The correct sentence should read, a reliable, efficient worker should be cherished. The subject worker should not be separated from the verb should. Here is another one. Do not place the comma after the coordinate conjunction when it joins clauses in a sentence. Always place the comma before the conjunction. For example, Tom applied for the position, but, he did not get it. That's incorrect. The correct sentence should be, Tom applied for the position, but he did not get it. The comma is always placed in front of the conjunction. Number 3. Do not use a comma to separate two parts of a compound subject, a compound verb, or a compound object when they are connected by and, or, and but. For example, the boys, and girls were equally capable of winning. That is incorrect. The correct sentence should be, the boys and girls were equally capable of winning. No comma is necessary. The compound subject, boys and girls, do not need to be separated. Let's look at one with compound verb. He walked or jogged all the way to the bus stop. We have a comma after walked, and that's incorrect. He walked or jogged all the way to the bus stop. We do not need to separate the compound verbs walked or jogged. And now for a sentence with a compound object. They mailed letters, and packages from the post office. That's incorrect. We do not need a comma after letters. They mailed letters and packages from the post office. And number 4, do not use a comma before than in a comparison. For example, it is better to fail than not to try at all. And we have a comma after fail. That is incorrect. The correct sentence should be, it is better to fail than not to try at all. We do not need a comma when we are using than. Well, that's it for this lesson. I hope you found it useful. I recommend that you watch these 2 videos on punctuation, the colon and the semicolon. I will post them in the description. Please subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell so that you won't miss any of my lessons. Thank you again for joining. See you next time.